Been watching ball with my big old brain and think the tape needs some explaining. Studying the stats to understand it. Hey, yo. Talk data to me. Talk data to me.
What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode number 6 of Talk Data to Me. Freedman, we're into week 6 of this show. It's only week 1, so we're already rounding, hopefully, into mid-season form, and that was kind of the goal. Can we be in mid-season form by the time week 1 gets here? You were the first guest ever on Talk Data to Me, which did really well. You got a lot of great feedback. People loved you, Freedman, and why would they not? You're really good at what you do. So already having you back on, and today we are going to talk about something, you and I, not too long ago, we just sat down. We've done it multiple times. We've done it virtually, but we've also done it live. So Freedman and I back, and I think it was April, Freedman, when we were doing our first run through projections, we just got together. We both had our first pass at it, and we had barbecue and beer, man. And we talked about football for 5 or 6 hours. And I remember you actually saying, man, I love this. This should just be a show. And I think then we were like, well, I don't know if anybody would want to watch us talk about projections for 6 hours, but we're going to try to do a condensed version of that conversation in a way. Because a lot of that was not just we talked through players, but we also talked through the why behind our players, about where we were in projections and how we were thinking about them with rankings. So, hey, man, just number one, just welcome back and thank you for jumping on the show. You ready to dive in?
Yeah, it's good to be back. I mean, it's sort of like, I know you're into music. It's sort of like Mark Lanigan when he was a full-time, quote unquote, full-time member of Queens of the Stone Age, and he would be on every 3rd or 4th song singing backup. That's sort of what this feels like. I'm eventually might be oh, Freedman's just sort of a semi-regular, but I just come to be associated with this show. That would be great.
Yeah, well, we may just have to add a third box that's always a placeholder for you. Even if we have a guest, maybe it's just a picture of your favorite beer or something, which I know you're into to all the different beers, guys. Freedman, I was never a big flight guy. I went to hang out with Freedman a few years ago. Actually, I think we were in Canton up for the Fantasy Football Expo, and we were sitting down to have some lunch, and Freedman, he doesn't just order a beer. He orders, 6 of the beers so he can taste them all, and he lets the notes wash over him, almost more like I would think about wine. But, you're very into the things that you're into, Freedman, and I love that about you. So the other thing that we're going to do here today, guys, so we're going to start off talking about rankings and projections and how those things can be different. We're going to talk about our processes, but then, of course, we're not going to leave you without any takeaways. We're going to jump into the top 10 discrepancies between our rankings and projections for week 1. We're going to talk through those, what some of the takeaways might be for fantasy football implications for your fantasy lineups this weekend. But to get us started, Freedman, this has kind of become a rite of passage, if you will. And I didn't do this to you on the first show. So we have got a partnership with Perplexity. You guys have probably heard of them. It's the AI engine that we use here at FantasyLife. And I just said, Perplexity, you're a smart AI robot. Is Matthew Freedman a good fantasy football analyst? Freedman, you're very lucky. Perplexity does like you. I told Ian last week that if robots take over, Ian's in good shape. They do like him. You're also on the good list. Matthew Freedman is widely regarded as a highly skilled and reputable fantasy football analyst. Highly reputable. Look at that, man. Backed by multiple years of proven success and industry acknowledgement, he is a 6-time top 20 finisher for fantasy football expert accuracy and has been recognized as the number one, guys, NFL mock drafter since 2020. Man, Freedman, they could have just put, you're a badass.
I mean, look, if you put it in your Twitter bio, it must be true. So I'm just glad that the AI overlords and future robots of the world actually think that I add value to my job. So that's good.
Well, it is good also, for Fantasy Life, you might want to send this to Dan Kaufman. Just saying. Dan might listen. Dan does listen to the show. So, Dan, if you're listening, let's keep Freedman around. All right. So, Freedman, let's start with a zinger for you. I like to start off, and it's always fun trying to make guests narrow things down very quickly to just one thing. This is kind of like how we just get the show off and running. But I want to know the biggest difference in rankings and projections for a player you have this week, the guy that you think is the biggest. And then I want you to tell me a little bit about why. Okay, you're either higher or lower with your ranks versus your projections.
So I would say the biggest meaningful difference. So not looking at guys like at the bottom of the ranks, projections and stuff, but
top
DK
100.
Metcalf. Yeah, DK Metcalf, I have a delta of 11 spots in the positional ranking. So I have him projected as my wide receiver 22. In the ranks, he's my wide receiver 33. That's a pretty big downgrade. And I will say, it makes me think of something that like I read that Harrison Ford once said to George Lucas, like about the writing for Star Wars. It was like, I mean, I don't know if I can use any, obscenities on here, but he said something like, you can write this shit, but you got to be able to talk it in a movie. And like, that's kind of how I feel about like projections. They're sort of like your base.
That's a great analogy.
It's like you can do the projections, but that's different than an actual game. And so especially it's week 1, there's always vast amount of uncertainty for everything in week 1. Even for the things we think we know, there's vast uncertainty. And then for the things where there's stuff that you just don't know, there's even more uncertainty. So uncertainty, I think, creates a situation where you want to be a little more cautious, especially if you're playing in like guillotine leagues or something like that. But you always kind of want to think about, how do I sort of limit some of the potential worst case scenario? And with DK Metcalf, because of the uncertainty, there's certainly some downside with him. Going to a new team, a new quarterback, a new offensive system, an offensive system that tends to be a little more run heavy, and then a tough matchup going against the Jets, who last year weren't as good on defense as they had been previously, but still have a lot of the same players, some tough matchups he could be going against with Sauce Gardner there, who he's probably going to match up with for a lot of the game. So you put all of that together and it's like, okay, I can project him for this one thing, but I have to sort of know in reality, there's a really wide range of outcomes, and he could skew pretty easily to the lower end of that spectrum.
Yeah, and I think, when you think about Metcalf, and we'll get more into this here in a minute, like kind of baseline assumptions around players, but let's just be honest, he's really only shown us a wide receiver 1 ceiling as far as a season goes. He's done it. Obviously, he can spike at any moment. DK can have a massive game, like we know that. But when you think about him for the course of a season, like, he's really more in that he's a wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 2, really. I mean, that then has these spike games. So you bring in all this uncertainty, like that makes sense to me. Like that you would have him, as someone that you're like, looks like you're a low end wide receiver 2, which is normally what you are, but we've now got all these new things that we're introducing. Now, what's funny, Freedman, is it could completely go the opposite way. These new things could end up being great for him, but I think what you're saying in week 1, we don't know, so you're going to lean a little bit more because there's multiple things here to the downside on DK versus, well, the one thing that could go right is Aaron Rodgers just latches onto him like he did Devontae Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think and you're, the poker player among the two of us. And so you kind of have to think, but I have friends who play poker, and the way to start, like, you want to give yourself multiple outs. Like, yes. DK Metcalf's path to upside is basically just one out, but there are like multiple ways in which this hand could go really poorly for him. So it's kind of just thinking about, like, it's as simple as a checklist sometimes, like, what are the good things what are the bad things that you have? And the bad for DK Metcalf is much longer of a list than the good things in his favor.
Yeah. So, and my, and this will kind of lead us right in, like we'll start talking about the process a little bit with our projections, and then we'll work our way into how we morph those into ranks. Because I start with projections. Now you and I have talked, I know you've done that in the past. I know you're kind of changing some of your process, but whenever you think about, each player and the way I have my projections set up, guys, like it's literally what Freedman just said, but it's all data driven. It's not me kind of hypothesizing, thumb in the air. It's literally and I have this for my ranks as well, but the projections is all basically automating it. And then I'm making some manual adjustments. Okay. So they've got a 17-point team total. Basically, that's really bad, guys. The team total, if you don't know what that is, basically if you take the spread and then you take the Vegas over under on the game, so the game total, and you put those two things together, you get what the team total is, right? So that's what the team is projected to score by Vegas. 17 is really bad. Like a really good number would be like you see 28 sometimes. Okay. And so right away, I know touchdowns are limited. And that goes into the projection because we're only going to project. Now, there is a layer to this year. This is really cool for you. We can talk about this in a minute, but we're now using the FantasyLife betting model, which is something that you, as well as our data scientist, Alex, have put together this off season. And I'm so excited about it because you've got all these years of knowledge. So now we use that, but it's still the same thing. Freedman may be our model might be slightly different from Vegas, but it's still saying, okay, 16 points for this team. Well, I can't give away 3 receiving touchdowns in a scenario where, a team's supposed to score 16 points. Now, there's a range of outcomes around these things, but I will say this, guys. I've gone back and researched it. Historically, Vegas people think about Vegas the wrong way, the bookmakers, right? They think, oh, they miss all the time. Yeah, they do miss all the time, but directionally, guys, they're correct. Over the course of time, when a game is projected to be really low in points, and Freedman, I remember I sent this to you a couple of years ago whenever I was doing the research, and you're like, yeah, that all checks out. Whenever the total was 16 or it was 17 or less, like 33% of the time, those teams failed to get to 18 points. And then like their ceiling was like 20. So, I mean, this research, and don't quote me exactly on those things, guys, like that's research I'm recalling. But basically, when Vegas says the game's going to be bad, it might not be exactly that bad. But overall, it typically is a bad game for the offense, right? Versus the rest of the league. So to what you were saying is it's got all those things, and it's got the defensive matchups. It's everything. But the thing I start to run into challenges with, Freedman, is the potential for double counting, right? Mm-hmm. Because the odds makers are already baking in, oh, you're playing a really good defense. Oh, your offense has a backup quarterback in. Oh, so talk to me a little bit, because the way I start is at that top level. And the first step really is looking at the game environment. How about you?
So I've kind of morphed the way that I do projections, and it's an always ongoing process, but the first time I did projections was maybe like 7-8 years ago. So I was, at Action Network, at Fantasy Labs, working with Sean Kerner and Chris Raymond, who I think are, two of the best rankers and projection guys in the industry. And so, some of it was just kind of osmotically trying to pick up stuff that they were talking about. And so, there's like the week-to-week system where I would try to start kind of with the top line information, what the betting lines are. So, what the implied team total is, what the spread is. And so you can get a sense of, is this a little more of a run heavy type of game? Like relative to what this team normally does, is it a little more pass happy? And then, getting your run pass ratios and then just kind of distributing everything from there.
Yeah. So whenever I look at the way that I handle it, it's like you said, they're a little bit different, but like you said, I do think they get us both to the same place. And so I really try to automate as much of those things that you talked about that really can be a pain in the butt. Because when you are trying to track them all down manually or doing anything like that, it can take you a really long time. But I'm also regressing to what we know players' baselines basically are, right? So I've got something in there around, here's where they've been for their career. Here's where they are for the season. Here's where they are over the last 6 games. Like, and there's different ways, right? You can weight those things. You and I have talked through a lot of that, like as far as season-long projections as well, and the way that the FantasyLife model works there. I think the most labor-intensive part for me, though, is updating all of the shares. So when I say shares, the target shares, the rush shares, and you know how it is. There's constant evolution, based on just trends. Utilization trends with these teams. That's a great place where you can use the utilization report, guys. If you're doing your own projections, like that's the thing I'm doing on Tuesday. That's step 1 for me. I'm going through all the teams and I'm looking at, okay, like this is the way we thought they were going to split up the backfield. Now, what does it look like? And I may hearken to like my priors on certain ones, depending on like the context of the game and things like that. But I mean, I'll start changing those things pretty quickly, especially after we've got 2 or 3 games of data, right? Like I'm going to adapt very quickly to Javonte Williams last night for the Cowboys. Right. I'm not going to hang around and be like, oh, guys, 35%. We don't know who's going to get the ball. No, assuming, especially if Jaden Blue's inactive again next week, I'm going to be much more aggressive, especially with the Miles Sanders fumble. So, like, that takes me a lot of time. And I am working with our data scientist, Alex. He's awesome and really, trying to figure out how we automate even more of that. But here's the thing. I don't think you can fully automate that. I think that's part of the, for me anyway, the magic sauce, if you will, is the willingness to sit down and grind through that information and really understand what's going on with each team at a very detailed level, and then adjusting those components. So that takes me about 6 hours, early in the season. As the season goes on and we got better trends established, the teams with injuries will take me longer, but there will be teams I'll be like, oh, that's right. That's right. And then, as the season goes on, that might take me 2 hours, but early in the year, I'll spend 6 hours on that.
Yeah, it's not magic sauce. Sorry, it's not secret sauce. It's magic sauce, and it really, it's like there's the science. You try to make it as scientific as possible, but there definitely must be art that comes into it in terms of knowing how quickly you move off of your priors, especially given like situations of uncertainty. I think the Javonte Williams one is a perfect one because it's like, all right, we were thinking Jaden Blue might be a factor. And like at the end of the season, he actually might be. But in week one, he was inactive. So it's like, all right, we got to make adjustments really quickly based on this new information that we have.
Yeah. So Freedman, I do want to ask you though. So my process, I'm still coming at the top level, right? I'm working through all the shares and things for the players, and then based on the game environment, like you mentioned, I've got run pass splits based on the team's history, based on the coach's history, based on the league's history. All these things, right? Saying, okay, there's an adjustment up or down on how much they're going to run or throw the ball this week, all those sort of things, and then boom, a projection, if you will, spits out. And then I've got my manual adjustments. I do want to ask you though, because, I thought it was really interesting what you said, that your process has morphed over the years to now more of a baseline kind of approach with some of these things. Is there something that like pushed you in that direction? Because I'll be honest, like I just had this conversation with James McCool. So James, guys, is behind the scenes. If you don't know him, he owns Pay Dirt. Great. If you guys are trying to win DFS contests, James always has folks over there using his stuff winning. You should go check out James McCool. One of the things I was talking with him about passing yards is, I'd work my way up using, okay, here's the game environment and everything. And then it's multiplying their attempts by YPA. And then I went to him, I was like, hey, what if we use like where they are in yards per game, because I actually found it to be more sticky week over week than YPA, and then just let it back into the YPA. And now the YPA is my check column. I just make sure that when I look at it, it doesn't, like somebody doesn't say 11,
right.
Versus like having it build up. So I'm wondering if like how you came to this conclusion was maybe something similar to that. Like, me, I definitely research it all, but what caused you to make that kind of change in the way you're handling projections?
Yeah, it was similar in that, like yards per attempt, or like the efficiency, or like the ratios that have to do with converting usage into yardage.
Right.
That can spike week to week. It can be really, really volatile. But the thing that stays pretty consistent is like the number of passing yards that a team is getting week to week, like within the range. Right. And so it was just, okay, I can project the number of plays. I can roughly project the number of yards. Those are the numbers that I care about the most anyway. Why don't I just like build around those as the big pillars instead of trying to do like this stoichiometry of like converting like everything from here to here to here to here to here. And then finally at the end, it spits out what I want.
Stoichiometry. That will probably never be used again on the show. Congratulations. We will send you the prize for whatever that is. Yeah. So it is interesting you say that, because I am, I did that some this year with my preseason projections. So I won't linger too much there, but I just find it fascinating that, so you've been doing projections a little bit longer than me. I've been doing projections for like 15 years, but where I'm actually doing them and they're getting put on a website, for everyone to see and ask you questions about and all those sort of things. And I have found myself, starting to, adapt. And some of it does come back to like some of these baseline principles that you're talking about. So I found that really interesting. So let me ask you this. What do you think is the most underrated aspect of projections?
I think they force you to think about the range of outcomes, like the way and especially the way the players are correlated. And so like you can tweak one thing here and then you see, oh, that changes this other number over here. And it changes that number for this guy, and it changes the numbers for all of these other guys too. And so it just kind of forces you, I think, to think about the team and the team production a little more holistically, and how that trickles to all of the other players. So if a quarterback passes for 225 yards, there can't be 250 receiving yards in the game, right? There like needs to be a balance of accounting, and doing the projections just kind of forces me to, I think, have a stronger sense of how everything is interconnected on the team. And maybe like that feels like a really obvious thing, but like once you like, there's a difference between knowing something and like getting in the kitchen and like putting the meal together. So I think like that's an underrated thing of projections. An underrated benefit of doing the projections is that it just forces me to think about how everything is interconnected in the offense.
It's so funny you say that, because when I first started doing projections, it was just to really try to come up with my first rankings list for a season so I could draft off of it. I've just always been that way, honestly, guys, pretty much with whatever I do. Like, I do outsource things, but my hobbies, the things that I really love or things that I'm really into, like, I just have to, what you said, I have to get into the kitchen and I have to do the nitty gritty work. And the first reason I did that was for what you said. Because I would actually go to websites, I won't name them, but the receivers, I would add up their yards, and it would be more than they had for the team passing for the year, by like 500 yards. I'm like, this doesn't work. Now, there is a range of outcomes, guys. Right. Like, so when we get to rankings, you will hear people say, well, this receiver and this tight end, example, Eagles, are all ranked, in the top 48 players or whatever it may be. That must mean Jalen Hurts is going to be awesome. Well, not necessarily, because now with rankings, what we're saying, like, there's also contingent value on these players. If A.J. Brown goes down, Devonta Smith is worth more. It's not that we're necessarily saying that they're all going to smash, right, and be top 48 players. What we're saying is, like, hey, it's a good offense. We feel it's a stable, environment. Like, there's things like that are going on that get baked into rankings, which we'll get into more here in a second. Like, for me, when I think about the most underrated aspect of projections, and I don't know if I could call it underrated now, but like, when I came up with the utilization report, my thought process was just really around all the different roles that are available to a player on the team. So we may know, and guys, you can be okay if you just use snaps, you just use rush attempt share, like those are your starting points, right? But it is really good to know who's getting the carries inside the 5-yard line. Because you can then bake that into how you're thinking about the projections. Because otherwise, what most people will do is they're like, okay, he gets, 55% of the carries. We're going to give him 55% of the touchdowns. What may happen is you got another back getting 70% of the carries inside the 5. Now, that may be for 5 teams in the whole league, but that's me. My brain is sick like that, and I feel like I need to know those things. The 2-minute offense. If you know which back is playing in the 2-minute offense and they're heavy dogs on the week, like, that's big for Tony Pollard this week, that he doesn't have to worry about Tajay Spears. That's a great example, because whenever you look at the Titans, they're big dogs playing against the Broncos. They're probably going to be trailing. The defense is going to take away the deep ball. So while Tony Pollard, we don't love his efficiency, to your point this week, like, he could still get there just on catching balls out of the backfield because they forced the checkdowns, right? So I think those things are really important to me to know, understanding the nuance of those things. But I think it's also very important to understand when it doesn't matter and don't force it. Because what we will see at times is that you think you may see a trend, but really there's not one, and so you don't want to try to force it. James Cook's a great example of that. Every year it's like, and sometimes it's because we want it to happen. It's like, I want James Cook to be the 2-minute offense back. Like, why would James Cook not be the back on the field in the 2-minute offense? But it's Ty Johnson. And so I'll see a little bump for James Cook like 1 week, and I'll be like, oh, 70% of the 2-minute offense. And then I hit the little toggle on the utilization report to snaps in the 2-minute offense, and I'm like, it's 2. Right. Like, our sample, like, they didn't run the 2-minute offense very much last week. They ran on 3 snaps, man. Yeah. So it looked at, and it was just by chance it looked good for James Cook. So I think that's really underrated. But let's go to the flip side of that. I think there's a lot of ways you can go with this one. Yeah. What do you think is the most overrated aspect of projections?
Matchups. It's not that matchups don't matter, but to your point earlier, they are at least partially baked in to the betting lines. But I think people will kind of separate the two and maybe double count a little bit. Yes. But there's always the question about how much matchups matter anyway. But most matchups are moderate. Right. Only like the really easy or the really tough ones meaningfully move the projection. So, let's say the Cowboys last night, right? Like the past, year they had like a bottom 2 run defense. It's like, okay, this is good for the Eagles. They're probably going to be better running the ball whenever they decide to do that. So for them, it makes a difference. But in most cases, the matchups don't matter now, or people might overweight the matchups. It really only matters on the extreme tails. So that's like one in terms of just kind of thinking about how tough the matchups are. And then specifically, people can also fall into this trap. I used to fall into this trap a lot. I still might in some cases, but thinking about the matchup weakness and saying, okay, this offense is going to change what they do to try to exploit this defense and like this specific defensive weakness. And it's like, actually, no. For the most part, teams don't really change offensively what they want to do. It's just, hey, this is the way we are. This is our specific run-pass ratio. We're going to kind of operate in our normal fashion, but we're just going to be slightly more efficient when we're doing that if we're going against a team that is bad in run defense. That doesn't mean we're going to run the ball all that much more than we normally would. It just means that when we choose to run the ball, we do it with more efficiency. But I used to think, oh, they're going against this really bad run defense. That just means they're going to lead all the way into the running game. Like, that's not really the way that most teams operate. Some offenses will do that a little bit, but for the most part, offenses sort of just do what they do. And where they get the benefit is just in facing a team that is exploited defensively in this one area, but they don't like shift on the spectrum all the way to try to exploit that maximally. They basically stay who they are.
Yeah. And I think also you've got to be an offense that's got the versatility to do that, to flip, to toggle that switch back and forth. Like the Lions would be a good example of a team that can be pass heavy if they need, they can be run heavy if they need. But really, to your point, if you go back and look at last year, that it's a yin and yang thing. Their belief system is that if you're balanced in those two things, they will both be good. The idea is like, we can be really good in both of these areas. And if we continue to use both of those things, the defense has to remain off balance. The element of surprise is the number one factor you can have on offense, besides obviously the talent, right? You've got the talent, You've got to have a good game plan in those things. But when you can keep a defense guessing, and the way you do that is you stay ahead of the down and the distance, right? So 1st and 10, they don't know if you're running or passing. It's really hard to just pull an all-out blitz, right? You're in 3rd and 12. There's extra people coming. Like, it's happening. Like, you can guarantee it. They want the ball out of your hand. They don't want the quarterback to be able to hit the deep shot. You guys saw it last night in the game with Dak Prescott whenever they got into those 2nd and long, 3rd and long plays in the second half of the game, and how it can change the complexity. But to Freeman's point, it's really about, like, do they have that ability? But even if they do, like, often, like the 49ers are another great example of this when their offense is clicking. Like, they're so balanced, the defense can never pin back the pass rush, right? And the linebackers can never ignore the run. Like, and that makes play action and everything else, right? All those other elements that you're trying to bake in, the linebackers have to respect it. Really, no matter how much you run, they're going to have to respect play action. But I will say the game script, like, that's what will drive teams. Like, and that's often like due to a weird turnover. Like, a ball gets tipped at the first, offense drives down and scores on the Lions defense. And then Jared Goff's second pass of the game gets tipped and gets picked off for a pick 6. They're going to throw more now. Like but that's like a variable that's really hard to account for, to be honest, like that sort of thing. So I think that's really good. I would take what you said one level deeper. I 100% agree. Matchups get double counted so bad. The other thing I would say that people do is they start thinking that they can actually, like, I'll see that, and I think it's really cool. So I'm not downing this because I love the context it brings to the game. But when I see folks saying against cover 1, in this type of alignment, this receiver has done this and this defense does this. And I'm like, guys, like, man, you know how small those samples are? Yeah. Like, I do believe you should look at man coverage and look at zone coverage. You start to get sizable samples on those things. But the thing is, I think it gets forced so much. It's just like what you said about defenses. It's the outlier scenarios we care about. Yeah. Like Deebo Samuel versus Brandon Ayuk had a 3-year trend going. And so the 3 times a year, they might play a man-heavy defense, which, by the way, guys, a man-heavy defense is like 40%. It's not even over half. It's like 40% of the snaps. But it was enough that I'd be like, okay, this is a really good spot for Deebo. The other one that was just like that was Tyler Lockett versus zone and DK Metcalf versus man. 49ers, it was Deebo against these heavy zone teams, which was most games. And then Brandon Ayuk having these games against man. So again, it's the outliers. It's the edge cases that we care about the most. Most everything sits in the middle. And so the matchups, you can play that all the way down the line from just how good of a matchup you're facing, period. And again, I do think when you're facing an elite defense overall, the odds makers are already accounting for it, in the way that we're seeing the lines, because you'll see that team total come down. All right. So I think that's a great one. All right. What in your opinion is the hardest part of doing projections?
All right, I'm not a data scientist. I'm not like a computer scientist, right? Like I don't code. Like I just try to hack stuff together in Google Sheets. You know what I mean? So, and I will say, like, I don't think I'm like exceptional in this. Like I think, there are a lot of people who don't have like a strong awareness of how to like manipulate data, right? And so the things that I know, I've learned just by, watching stuff on YouTube or like having conversations with someone about like, oh, hey, how do you do this? But it's just like hacked together. So for me, the tough part is like the technical aspect and so there's like, all right, one, how do I put data into this sheet and then store it in all these different forms so that I can easily manipulate it and ping against it and get all of the things, extract all the insights that I need from it. And then, so there's like the technical aspect and then there's the knowledge aspect of like, I'm not a statistician. I'm not a mathematician. So like I can have this idea of, okay, here's how I think these things come together. And then it should be adjusted in this way to account for league averages. But it's like, like actual mathematicians might debate each other about like, what's the best way to make these adjustments. I'm just a dude. So it's like having to think about these things that like I never thought when I was in college I would have to think about these things. So it's like trying to kind of make an informed decision. So it's like the technical aspects and some of like the knowledge things, like those are for me, the things that present challenges when I'm trying to do projections.
So guys, when I hang out with Freedman and we talk about projections, I think of like, someone that would, an airplane engineer, I guess is the person that designs airplanes. And there's a backup for everything. There's a contingency. Yeah. There's 3 backups for the flap, there's 7 backups for something else, so when I think of you, I think of, we sit down and we start talking through this and you'll lay out like how you're handling all these components, and Freedman will have like 6 things in there. He's like, well, it's 10% to the player's career average, and it's 5% to this, and it's like 20% to this, and it's 30% regress to the league. And I'm like, I will say sometimes, like I look at Freedman, I'll be like, man, I mean, I think you just ended up where you started, but you do have all these regression components, which I really think that you need. I think that it keeps you ultimately, I say that jokingly, the joke that I made, because you have to try to stay, rooted in reality. And the reality is, Ian says this much better than me, and I can't say it on the show, but we don't know F about S. Yeah. You have to sometimes, you have to know what you don't know. And especially when we're playing weekly projections, season long, like the range of outcomes, obviously it can be even tougher because you don't know how it's going to go. But man, there's so much variance on a week over week basis. There's just so much that's going on. So I would say, for me, the toughest part, honestly, is getting the projection model to a state where I think it's actually rooted in some of the things that I was just talking about with you. But I again, it's a blessing and a curse, guys. Because Freedman will tell me at times, he'll be like, dude, he's like, I don't think you have to go research all that. I'm like, but you don't understand. I won't be able to sleep. I have to go research and say, okay, does this matter? Like historically, has this thing mattered? And if it does, great, it's in the model. If it doesn't, it's out, period. Like it's just not in there. And I think a lot of people do this, but I think a lot of people don't, because it's a major extra step. Now I get to do this full time. So like, I think that should be the expectation. A lot of people are trying to do this thing part-time, and I can get it. It can be tough, and you can learn from other people's models and probably be pretty good. But the journey of trying to figure out what matters and what doesn't matter. And that's where I came to the defensive stuff around, these coverages. I tested it all. I tested it. It's complete noise. It's all over the place. You will occasionally find a nugget. And my problem is you will see Twitter flooded with this stuff, right? Yeah. And you will see articles flooded with this stuff. And again, talking about the things in the middle, not the edge cases. When people talk about the edge cases, I'm like, I'm down. Like, let's talk about the edge cases. They probably matter. You guys, you have to think about it this way. How often do you run into a team, as example, going back to the covers, that runs Superman heavy, and we know that doesn't even mean 50%, that actually lines up with another team that they're playing on offense that actually has a trend that's a large enough sample that we can use to say this is an edge. Guys, you know how random that is?
Like 3 times a year.
Yes. It doesn't. You might have a game or two a week because you have those 3 or 4 teams that have that offensive trend. And then it's a matter of, are they playing one of those others? And so actually like maybe once a week or once every other week, to your point. Sometimes you'll get multiple in a week. But like, I'll see this stuff, hey man, whenever they face the blitz, this and that, and it's the slot. And I'm like, maybe it's just Cooper Kupp, man. Maybe it's just Cooper Kupp. Like, maybe he's just a badass. Like, what are we doing? Like, we're overthinking things. So I really got into I got in like the bunker for like 2 years on that stuff. And I just lost a lot of my life. And I now know the answer to those things is no. But, I'll never get those hours back, Freedman. But at least I know that I don't have to put that into the model, which, is positive because it's not easy to get it in there.
That was like an old man on the lawn. That was like pure wet blanket stuff to where it's basically like nothing matters. I did the research and guess what I found? We're all getting
things matter, just not that. And I'm not saying that doesn't matter, to be clear.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter in a way that we can actually use it to predict something.
Right.
That's the challenge of it, right? And I love to talk about it, guys. You guys the shows talk data to me.
Yeah.
Like you don't know how often I go to research something and I am yearning. If you guys watch Dexter, they have the itch, they have the yearning to kill. I have the itch for like this data, like when I go down this rabbit hole, that it's actually going to be like, oh my God, like this is awesome. This really matters. And I'm just being honest. 95% of the time it doesn't. Now, when you find that 5%, it is a beautiful moment. It's a very beautiful moment. But I will also just say this. Football is a game of so many random variables that, it offsets a lot of those things. Yeah. It just does. So, again, I will continue on my voyage, Freedman, to continue. I love chasing these things down, but I also hate it at the same time.
I like what you said. Like, the stuff matters, but it doesn't matter in a way that you can project. But, like, we'll touch on this later. I think it does matter for rankings because, like, it does give you like this, okay, there's this path. There's this potential path to upside, or there's this path to downside. And that's not really going to be captured in the median projections, but it is going to be captured in thinking about the range of outcomes.
Right. But again, I still think you need to bank that even in something we can say, even though you may not say it's a projection, but it's enough that would cause us to move the ranks. But again, I think that's where we'll come back to the outliers. Okay. So let's keep moving here. We'll do about another 5 minutes on like the behind the scenes stuff here. And then guys, we're going to jump into the top 10 discrepancies for the week between the rankings and the projections. Learn how to talk to Wayne. If you are watching the new Dexter, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but they're the detective in New York. Her enunciation is impeccable of every single word. There are no contractions around anything. She plays a great role. So anyway, you'll check that out. And I need to talk like her so I don't mumble up my words. All right, Freeman. Projections are done. They're all in place. You've done all this work. You've got all this knowledge. You've built this model over all these years. Why not just use them for your rankings? Why not just use those?
If I were smart, I would just do that. It takes less time.
No, you can't say that because here's why. When you first came to Fantasy Life, I was, for those of you not watching the show, you're just listening. I was just pointing at the camera, pointing at Freedman. I asked Freedman, this was 3 years ago now. We're sitting at the airport. We had just finished up in Canton. Freedman and I having a beer. There's a trend here. We're having a beer at the airport. Elliot Freedman, our boss, Elliot Chris is sitting right next to us at the table. Freedman and I are talking projections. And I said, I was like, I'm thinking about leaning more into my projections for my ranks this year and, trying that. And Freeman just goes, I wouldn't. And you said because you tried it one year in the Fantasy Pros and it was your worst
terrible.
year. Trying to go. So there is, now we're going to get into that in a second. I think there's a reason for that that's not necessarily tied to the range of outcomes for a player. Maybe some, but there's some gamesmanship going on. So sorry, Freeman. Back on your path, man. People have been giving me in the contents. Will this like host shut his mouth and like just let the guests share their knowledge? So I'm going to do that now. Why wouldn't you just use your rankings?
Yeah, quote unquote, because I know better, right? Like it's like, oh, my projections tell me one thing, but I know better. Like I know what's not. And I will say there's maybe a little factor of this, like, okay, Dwain, it's like a mechanic working on a car or something. It's like, what the weakness of your projection system is. In theory, like I might have a sense of where my projections might have some holes. So it's like, in theory, I might know better, but also like, it's kind of fun to play around with the rankings a little bit. Just like they don't capture everything. They're a representation of like the middle, the moderate outcome. And I think rankings, we want them to be a little more holistic in that it's like, okay, we have these guys like all projected within a point of each other. Now we can sort of stack them and think about like who may be the most upside, who has the most downside, and try to position guys accordingly within those tiers. So like I think of, like the projection as something that sort of like gets you on the road. And then the rankings is sort of like how you navigate the road once you're on it.
How do you choose how you're going to approach someone? Because I'm with you. This is actually the reason, in my opinion, for rankings. When you do your projection and you look at your median, guys, like go pull it up right now at FantasyLife.com. By the way, we now have ceiling and floor projections. When you see X best, that's Xfinity best. That's now the ceiling for that player. Yeah. And we've based all this. We've let, like Freeman said, a data scientist and a mathematician help us actually this offseason model all this out and say around these things that make up fantasy points, which things carry the most variance week over week, which things carry the most variance year over year, depending on if you're looking at our weekly or our rest of season projections. That determines what the model obviously is going to use. And we've got ceilings and floors. And I'll tell you, Freeman, I was in there the other day, just real quick, and I sorted on ceiling for quarterback, and there was Daniel Jones. He's like the number 8 ceiling. But why? Because he runs, and he passes. And what's funny, I was like, I'm going to go test this model right now. Not that we didn't already test it to death, guys. But I was like, I think it might be broken. When I saw that, I knew it wasn't, because I knew how we built it. But I wanted to go check, and I looked at Daniel Jones because he had like a 29-point ceiling. People are going to see that. This thing's a piece of trash. Like, I want my money back. Well, guys, if you go look at Daniel Jones over the last 3 years and you look at all the games where he scored 30 to 28 fantasy points, it's up there with all the leaders. He will bust on you. But when it talk about his ceiling, it's definitely there, for Daniel Jones. So, whenever I look at these and they're all together, I do like what you do. I'm like, okay, we may have 20 receivers within 1 point of one another, right? 1.5 points. And so I do start to stratify, but how do you choose whether or not you're going to take the floor view on a player or you're going to take the ceiling view? Because I do struggle with that. So I mostly, because I know I struggle with that and I worry I will just pick and choose the wrong moments, I mostly lean to ceiling. And and I use the Xfinity best for me to go look at the ceilings. Mm-hmm. And if I see guys that are higher, then I gravitate towards pushing them up the ranks. Guys that are a little bit lower, I gravitate towards pushing down, trying to be consistent. But how do you choose which way you're going to go on those guys when they're all so close?
That's a good question. So I would say like I have sort of guidelines, but then I break the guidelines all the time. Not all the time, but occasionally. But so let's say if a guy is in that starter range, then I think it's a little more important to think about the downside that he has, or like the type of player that a guy is. I think it's important to kind of think about like, what is it?
So give an example of that. Give an example.
So let's say Daniel Jones, he's not someone that you're going to be starting this week, right? Like you would have to be sort of desperate to think about Daniel Jones. So then it's like, all right, if you are desperate, does he have the upside that you need out of someone who is in his general ranking position? It's like, okay, yes, he does, right? But if we're thinking about, so that's like, say Daniel Jones is like, I don't know, at best, the QB 17.
And so the key there, though, is you're talking, he's it's because of an archetype thing for him.
Yes.
Right? Because
Yes.
he has, back to what you started the show with, multiple outs. He has multiple ways that he can get to fantasy points, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, passing yards, not a great passer. When you put it with what he does as a rusher, like, it helps.
Yeah. So like Daniel Jones, someone you wouldn't be thinking about starting except for maybe a super flex situation,
Sicko.
guillotine leagues, something like that. Exactly. Sicko start, right? So that for someone like a sicko start situation, you're looking for upside because you're desperate. But if we're looking at like Kyler Murray, if we're looking at a guy that you would be starting in most situations, then I kind of want to think about some of the downside of those guys because you're already going to start him, right? Now it's a matter of like, not really like, what is his ceiling? Although in some situations you do want to think about that. It's also like, what is the risk that this guy presents to your portfolio this week if you put him in your starting line?
I love that. So more scrutiny around guys that are accepted pretty much as starters on a week-to-week basis for the floor.
Yes.
And then more of an emphasis on ceiling for the guys that, hey, I need a little something extra this week, or I got to pick somebody up, or I need to make a trade. Okay. Like I love that. I have thought about it in that way some in the past. But like, I may want to be even more programmatic, like with it. Like, I love that.
Yeah. And then sometimes I'll tweak the way I'm looking at it just based on like, all right, well, this matchup is so good that it's like, okay, I know that normally I have this guy in the top 5, but really this week I need to have him number 2. You know, something.
The challenge for me when I do what you're talking about is I start getting the flippening.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have like DK Metcalf, great example. Normally a low end wide receiver 2, we'll go there. You put him to whatever it was, wide receiver 33.
Yeah.
Wherever you have him this week.
Yeah.
Well, when you do that, you also have a bunch of wide receivers that now jump him.
Yeah.
And I also think about that because I'm like, what statement is that sending to these people? So I will always, when I do that, I do try to, when I finish my rankings, I try to go back through them. And guys, these calls can be so close and there's so much variance. Like I don't like over scrutinize it, but I generally check for acceptance on my part of would I actually start these 3 players over DK Metcalf?
Yeah.
That's different than projections.
Right.
Would I actually start? And some of that comes down to the IKB, right? I know better, or now today that's I know ball, or you know ball. Freedman is YKB. IKB is I know ball, but it's really almost an intuition, on some of those things of this stuff baked into you, into your DNA.
Yeah. Agree.
Okay, so let's do one more thing here. I want your thought on ranking competitions. I'm not saying ranking competitions are bad or good, but I think you have some great perspective on it. Number one, because you've done really well. But the thing people forget is rankings competitions are a game.
Yeah.
They are a game within themselves. Imagine, guys, if you were entering a rankings competition, what is the rule of any game? You need to, know the rules, right? Yeah. What are the parameters of this game? You play football. The field is so wide. The field is so long. You got so many players you can put on the field. You're trying to figure out how you create this space. How do you create leverage against your opponent? All these different things. How do you throw the counter punch when they're expecting, the left hook and you hit them in the gut? Like, all these things that go into any game you play, chess, video games, all of it, the same thing goes into this kind of competition. And I love, your thought process around this. So share with people your thoughts here on rankings.
Yeah. So, and there are different types of competitions. I think in general, the goal of a competition would be, hey, let's sort of acknowledge the guys who are actually great at doing the rankings instead of like, but it's always going to be a game. They have to make rules, and the existence of rules means that it's a game. But I would say you don't need to be all that far off of consensus to gain leverage because there's a lot of echo chamber, a lot of kind of going to the middle in how people do rankings. So you don't you might think, oh, I need to move this guy down 20 spots. No, 5 to 10 spots is probably sufficient to gain leverage. And then I would say there can also be too much focus on people, especially I'd say who were newer at like rankings competitions or really any competition of like thinking about how to be different. Just try to be right. It's like a Survivor contest or a picks betting contest. For most of the year, just focus on being accurate, like more so than gaining leverage. Just like make sure that by the end of the season, you are in a spot to be able to compete.
But can you say that, Freedman? Can you really say focus on being accurate? Because ultimately, if it is an echo chamber, I mean, what stops people from just downloading the thing at the last second, right? And just barely tweaking it. They know Sean stuff's in there. They know Raybon stuff's in there. They know all the top rankers already have their stuff in there. And so this is the part, like, again, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's the part that makes me wonder, like, really, how helpful is it? And it's why I've never entered one. Because honestly, I don't want to play that game with the way that I'm actually trying. I'm honestly, guys, trying to share the way I would handle my team with you. And you knowing that I have a lot of money invested in these teams and I want them to do well. And so I'm trying to do the best job I can with it. And I just love the data and stuff, but like, can we really say you're focused on being accurate? It really feels more like you're more focused on playing the game. And then as the season goes, you have to take more risk or less risk based on where you are.
Maybe. I mean, and I'm sure there are different ways of approaching it and sort of how people might sort of tweak things in their rankings. But I mean, at least for me, the way that I focus on it, and I'll say I've never won a competition, but I've always like finished top 20. I would say always, like routinely I finish top 20. So I feel like I have a good sense of how to like be accurate in the contest, not playing the game well enough in terms of thinking about how to gain leverage or like when to push specific buttons. But I'd say it feels similar to me to like a DFS tournament, you know, like some have game theory involved. Let's say there are two options. Who's going to be wide receiver one, and you know, like 80% of the field is going to go with this one guy, but really it might be 60-40 in terms of who ends up as the wide receiver or who out of those two ends up higher ranked that week or higher performing that week. And so you can gain leverage by just going with the other guy. I think there are opportunities, especially at the end of the season, to game things like that. But I don't know, like I can see the benefit of it, but at the same time, it's like you're trying to give people the best guidance possible with your rankings. I think that is still the thing that you should focus on the most.
Yeah, and I will say I do think there's value in consensus. It just depends on how we come to consensus. If consensus is mostly, and I'm not saying this is happening. I don't know. I've not really researched enough or dug into it or asked enough people. But if consensus is just more echo chamber or everyone, because I'll be honest, if I tried to play this for the first time, that would be my first move. I would download the rankings for the week. I would look across them for the things I know from doing my projections and rankings, and I would just make slight tweaks based on edges that I think I might have that the field doesn't, because I research so much about these shares and things. That's probably the edge I would try to lean into. And so what I do think we can take from it is the people that do really well in it year over year over year over year. Like you've talked about Sean Kerner, Action Network, and some of these other people. Jeff Ratcliffe always does really good in it. So I think there are people that actually are really good at rankings and projections, and they also understand how to play this game. So in general, they're smart people, right? Yeah. They're smart people winning these things, and they're showing consistency. So I think that's what I care more about, like is the consistency side, like the year over year, and those folks. So I think that is very impressive. You're obviously one of those people. So all right, so let's jump into the top 10 rankings versus projection discrepancies for week one. Guys, you know this show, we are allowed to go longer. We do not have to be done, in 1 hour. So we'll probably go another 30 minutes or so here, Freedman. We have several names we want to get to. Of course, because the show's longer, I'm going to include a bonus right off the top. This is not going to count as one of the 10, but it is just a quick chance to because it's already happened.
Yeah.
So you and I both on George Pickens, we had our ranks lower than where we had our projection. So the projection rank would be if you sorted the wide receivers by projections. Freedman had in his projections, Pickens was wide receiver 29, but in his ranks, wide receiver 36, so -7. My model, wide receiver 19 is where Pickens landed, for this week one, but I moved him down to wide receiver 27 in my rank. So I had him more as a high-end wide receiver 3. Freeman had him as a borderline wide receiver 3 in our ranks. So number one, congratulations. We were correct to move him down. You were more correct, because I think he's we'll see if he even is a wide receiver like 4 this week. Like, what was it? 3 catches for 30 yards. Great tweet. By the way, I can't remember who did it. One of the PFF guys. But it shows George Pickens on that, where he thinks he gets the pass interference in the end zone. The ball is really probably uncatchable from Dak to the back corner. He's going to get up and he grabs the cornerback's leg, and then he realizes the cameras are on him and he just lets go. And I think the tweet, I'm going to mess it up, but it was basically the devil on George Pickens' shoulder almost was this close to winning.
Yeah.
It came out later, on a personal foul where, he threw a guy to the ground. So just talk to people real quick. Like, this is a great example. Like, we both felt it. That we need, the projection said one thing, but we need to move him down.
Yeah. Uncertainty in situation, new quarterback, playing next to one of the best wide receivers in the league in CeeDee Lamb. Really tough matchup. And so you don't know exactly what they're going to do with Quinyon Mitchell. Like, it makes me think, this is going in the way back time machine, but Dwayne, I think you would probably remember this. It makes me think of the Cowboys going against the 49ers with that one year when the 49ers had Deion Sanders, and the whole buildup to that NFC Championship game was Deion Sanders on Michael Irvin. And then no, actually it was Deion Sanders on Alvin Harper. And then they were just double covering Michael Irvin. So there was like the question of like, okay, people think it might be Quinyon Mitchell on CeeDee Lamb, but what if it's Quinyon Mitchell on George Pickens and they just use him to shut him down, and then they just manage CeeDee Lamb, right? So it's just all of these factors of like, we don't know this is going to idea for how George Pickens functions in this offense, an idea for who's going to be going against, defensively in the secondary, but we just don't know. So downgrading a little bit.
Yeah. So same thing for me here. So he just checked multiple boxes, even though the projections sometimes don't always catch it, because like ultimately the Cowboys team total this week was lower than what we're going to see for them a lot of the weeks. But in the model, they were also a big dog, which pushed up passing attempts some for Dak. And we already know the Cowboys are going to be a pass heavy team. So the potential for targets and yards were there. Not huge upside for touchdowns though. And I felt that was even though the Cowboys did end up scoring, a decent amount of points in this game, and it felt like it was going to be a lot more than what it ended up being. But ultimately my concern was like a big path for George Pickens to his fantasy ceiling. And this can be so hard to predict, but it really is touchdowns. And this is an Eagles defense that would likely be playing from ahead. And once you're playing from ahead and you're forcing a team to be which didn't happen, by the way, and he still didn't get there. But when you take away balance, it takes away big plays.
Yeah.
Because now you become predictable. When you're predictable, it's much harder to go over the top of a defense to get that. And guys, with how defenses play now, it's so tough anyway to get that. You happen to have a guy running the right route at the right time of the game where you get the look you want. The quarterback sees it and ends up being a touchdown. And that's why you get all these, couch potatoes, like going back and rolling through not couch potatoes. These film warriors, like, the ones that have been doing it for a while, because they don't like go point these things out all the time. But I will see people that are new. They're like, oh man, Dak missed this throw. He missed this. He's this. And then people are coming back like the Ted Wins of the world from The Athletic. They're like, okay, look at the defense. Look at the progression. There's a reason he didn't see George Pickens running wide open. But my point being is like all these variables have to come together to hit that long touchdown, which is such a big part for Pickens. So let's dive into number one here. We have tiers here, guys. Tier 1, we've got 3 players that Freedman and I are both lower on in our ranks than we are. Well, actually, we just have a difference between our ranks and projections. 2 of them were lower. 1 of them were actually higher in the ranks than we are the projections. And we're going to start with the one with the biggest discrepancy, and that is Courtland Sutton. Freedman's wide receiver 28 in the projections, wide receiver 22. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. This is actually a positive. Wide receiver 22 in the ranks. I have him wide receiver 29 in the projections and wide receiver 23 in the ranks. Freedman.
Man, I hate this because I've been down on Courtland Sutton all off season.
There you are.
And then week 1, I'm like, bump him up in the ranks. But it's like, I think a really high floor. Like, I think for the season, Courtland Sutton has a diminished ceiling, but I think this week, really high floor. They're at home. They're big favorites, a higher total.
So you just broke your rule. This is a receiver people are actually going to be starting, but you wanted the floor. But what's funny is I agree with you. And the reason why is a lot of the guys that are around him, there is more uncertainty.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I know this is the same offense for Courtland Sutton. I know he's getting to play with his same quarterback. So there's new things. there's Evan Ingram. There's 2 new running backs that are actually worth getting the ball to. I mean, you could have Troy Franklin, some of these other guys step up. I'm not saying Courtland Sutton comes without risk, but versus a lot of the other guys that are around him that I think have more potential for downside. Yes. I agree with you. And so we're on the same page here on Sutton. All right. Jaylen Warren. I'm going to start this one. So you've got him running back 22 in your projections. He goes to running back 27 in the ranks. I've got him running back 25 in the projections, running back 29 in the ranks. So guys, projections, the man has outs. We've talked about it many times. He can catch the ball. He can carry the ball between the 20s. He's also pretty good inside the 5-yard line. He has explosive playmaking ability. A lot of outs for Jaylen Warren. I will give you a 2-word answer to this one. Arthur Smith. I don't ever trust Arthur Smith, much less in week 1. Yeah. Especially when we saw how much they used Kenneth Gainwell in the preseason. Like I just, this man, I actually think is a decent play caller, but he drives me insane with the way he uses his players. So for me, you've got to show me for me to believe it. Now I drafted Jaylen Warren in fantasy this year because of those outs for a season long, but in week 1, I'm gonna be on the low side.
Yeah, in 2 to 3 weeks, we will know much more. And I would say in 2 to 3 weeks, we will have much less of a delta, I would imagine, for a lot of our players between projections and rankings. But in week 1, we can project this stuff, but Arthur Smith is there, and the matchup against the Jets is pretty tough. We just don't have any idea for what this split really is going to look like in the backfield. They spent a top 100 pick on a pretty good runner, and then Kenneth Gainwell is also not a bad player on his own. So it really could be a 3-headed backfield, and we don't know. So I'm being a little more cautious. Yeah.
Right. It's like, he's going to be our guy. Translation could be Jaylen Warren's going to be our guy between the 20s. We're going to give the ball to Caleb Johnson when we get inside the 5-yard line, and Kenneth Gainwell is going to play our 2-minute offense. Yeah. That would still technically be correct.
Right.
Jaylen Warren's our main running back. Yeah. But he loses the 2 most important, things as far as, scoring 2 of the more important things. Inside the 5 works is number 1 by far. But in a PPR league, not being out there on the field, on obvious passing downs, / 2-minute offense, that can hurt. So, yeah. Same page. All right. I think this one's going to be pretty easy. I may not even say anything here, but we're both similar. Malik Nabers, New York Giants versus the Washington Commanders. Wide receiver 5 in your projections, but UKB wide receiver 2. YKB, wide receiver 2. I've got it. Wide receiver 7 and wide receiver 4. So we're both 3 spots higher in our rankings than our projections.
Yeah, I just wanted to be super high on him. He's the guy that I wrote up as the featured player in my Freedman's Favorites article. I mean, you look at the utilization report that you mentioned last year, and he's just last year, top 3 as a rookie in so many of the numbers there. I've been projected for 167 targets this year, highest in the league, and honestly, I feel like I might be too low. I think you look at the offense that he's in, I imagine it's better with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and Jackson Dart as the guys potentially throwing to him versus what he had last year. And then there's that matchup, going against the Commanders defense that last year was 29 in defensive dropback EPA. And specifically, I think he's going to run. I reference wide receiver cornerback matchups, even though I know all right, in some situations that means this guy's running 40-45% of his routes against this one guy. But, it's still something to think about, especially if the other guy, the other cornerback, I also don't think is all that great or has issues. But we're going to have Nabers running, I think, about 45% of his routes against Trey Amos, who is a first rounder. Okay. But he's also a rookie cornerback. I think Nabers against a rookie who has, 0 NFL experience to this point, I think that's a matchup I would look to exploit. So for a lot of reasons, I just wanted to be high on Nabers this week.
So I'll just keep this one short. Malik Nabers is awesome.
Yeah.
I will say there's risk with Malik Nabers. He does have the new quarterback. And let's be honest, Russell Wilson, that's not his forte, man. Throwing quick timing routes, because the way Malik Nabers unlocks the whole field, he can do everything. But the way he got peppered with so many targets last year is a lot of the quicker stuff. and that bolstered him. And then he would make the big plays and things down the field. What I think there's going to be a little bit of a trade-off here. I think you're going to potentially lose a little bit from a target volume perspective, but you're going to get some of the bigger plays down the field. And I think those things end up being a wash. And I think the other thing I like, is if we're abbreviating wash to Washington, is they're willing to be very aggressive. And that can open up big plays. They're willing to be very aggressive on defense. And that's the kind of defense that Russell Wilson can still burn. And so with a guy like Malik Nabers, I'm with you, wanted to be high. All right, we're going to move to tier 2 here. And so we'll kind of rotate back and forth. Freedman. This one is actually quite fascinating to me. Chris Olave, you have as your wide receiver 44 in your projections, but wide receiver 30 in your rankings. So you're going to have to explain yourself on this one. That is a big difference. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I have pulled up our projection page. That first column there is Freedman. The second column is me. The third column is our consensus between us, wide receiver 36. And see, this is where it gets tricky for me, Freedman, because when you go to Olave at 30 on a move like that, you are saying you've got him above Ridley. You've got him above Metcalf. You've got him above Hunter. I could get it. Hunter's got a great matchup, but I get the uncertainty there. You've got him ahead of Pickens, which is all probably already right. You're probably already correct on that one. But Metcalf and Ridley, like that's a tough little range there. Those guys are pretty close.
Yeah, Metcalf and Ridley have tough matchups and are in pretty uncertain situations. Now Olave, bad situation with Spencer Rattler throwing in the ball, but like I think Olave, and if you obviously Dwayne, stuff looking at the utilization report, creating the utilization report, I think Olave is like a low end wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2, just in terms of talent.
Agreed.
And so I'm going to want to take a little bit of a bet on talent, given that I think he has an upgrade in offensive play calling head coach Kellen Moore. So I think he has an upgrade there. And then I don't especially respect the defense of the Cardinals. I think they're exploitable. They have Max Melton, who has 3 NFL starts to his name, and then a rookie corner on the other side. Like, I think they are gettable. The Cardinals, I think they're gettable in this. And I think, that indoor environment, they are going to be trailing, so they're going to be throwing the ball a little bit more. This is just me saying, all right, this guy who in talent is a wide receiver 2, but in terms of like the rankings or projections might be like in your flex spot. This is sort of, no, I want this guy in my lineup this week. I want to take a shot on him.
Yeah. So I think I do agree on the talent perspective on Olave. My struggle is just like this team total is so terrible. The quarterback situation is terrible.
Yes.
I think he has to get there on the catches. And now here's the thing. Kellen Moore's offense, there's going to be more quick passes and Olave's playing the slot. So I will say that's the positive. So I would say Olave in a PPR league, I do like more than a standard league. Like I think in a standard league where obviously you weight so much more to touchdowns, you lose all those points for the catches. Olave, and guys, there's not as big of a difference in some of these things as you think when you move from one scoring projection to another, but Olave would be an example of that for me, where I could see him coming away from this thing with 7 catches for 80 yards, no scores. Like, he could be almost, maybe half of their receiving yards for the game, maybe 40% of the receiving yards for the game. He's going to get the good matchups. He's going to get the easy zone looks against the linebackers and safeties. So I really do like that, about the scheme. So the next guy that we will go to here is on me, and I've got a projection of wide receiver 36, but I've got a rank of wide receiver 24 on Marvin Harrison Jr. So Freedman's at 20. Now, this is the same game. Here's the thing I like about Marv. There's a big team total here. But you could argue that I'm double counting it because the projections already accounted for it. But again, it came to this situation where whenever we look at like, the projections, for these players, because right now, I'm on the rankings, but if I come over here, let's go to the wide receivers. Let's go to Harrison. I got to expand it. But when I started thinking about the potential outcomes here for when I started thinking about the receivers this weekend, Freedman, that it wouldn't surprise me if they caught 2 touchdowns. Like I think through little things like that, like as I'm thinking through this. And again, some of that is like a little bit of an intuition, right? A gut feel. But Marv was on the list for me. And if you look at him, like his ceiling, the Xfinity best is 22.6. So even it, like in the model, is not, fantastic, even though the model's already accounting for the fact that we think the Cardinals are going to score a lot of touchdowns. You and I both love James Conner this weekend. Like James Conner, in my opinion, is the smash play on the Cardinals this weekend. Checks both boxes. We've got a big team total. They're favored by 8.5 as of like yesterday, I believe, but it's over a touchdown that they're favored by. So that historically has been a good recipe for running backs. Receivers, though, what I have learned in those scenarios, like that lead could all be built in the first half, and most of the touchdowns could come in the first half. Yeah. And it's like you said, they're not going to just come out trying to run the ball because they're going to play their offense in the first half. And a lot of these games that end up in blowouts, more of the points come in the first half. So that's why I moved Harrison ultimately up. Like you see here, this is our consensus projection. Actually, I think if you guys are looking along, actually, when you can see it, you can click on all, or you can click on me, or you can click on Freedman. I like to look at ours together. And so 36. So it really came down to me saying, all right, who are the guys here that could score the 2 touchdowns? He was on it. So we're going to go to the next one here. And I look at me, rookie move, going to show the show sheet. I don't think it matters, man. Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 29, Freedman, in your projections, but wide receiver 39 for you in your rankings.
That's a pretty big downgrade.
It is.
So we're recording this on Friday. By the
you could have changed this.
Maybe by the end of the day, we'll know more on Christian McCaffrey. And so a lot of this was expecting that the 49ers would have a pretty run-heavy approach. I think the Seahawks offense is going to struggle. And so I was thinking, just in terms of game state, the 49ers leaning more into the running game. But if Christian McCaffrey is out, then all of a sudden I start to shift assumptions. I think they pass a little bit more. But kind of big picture, I think the Seahawks defense is going to be really good. I think they're going to take a step forward, second year under defensive head coach Mike McDonald. And that secondary for the Seahawks specifically, you've got Devin Witherspoon playing your slot, and then you've got Tariq Woolen on one of the corner spots. Yeah. I would think that, for like 65 or 70% of his routes, maybe even a little bit more, if he's getting some more slot work, we would see him going against those 2 guys. And I think he's got talent. He was drafted in the first round, but he has only like 4 NFL starts to his name. I think it would be a negative matchup for him. And with Jawan Jennings being cleared, coming back, then I would start to downgrade a little bit. So I might be a little bit too low on him, especially now with the Christian McCaffrey news. And I'll kind of want to go back in and readjust some things. But I think the matchup is tough, and that went into a lot of the downgrade.
Love it. So I was wide receiver 26 in the projections, 28 in the ranks. Just a little bit of uncertainty there. But to your point, quick sidebar, because I don't see how we can skip past this. You brought it up, and we're talking data. We're talking projections. We're talking about rankings. CMC's out. How high does Brian Robinson Jr. go? We do also have Isaac Guerrero returning fully to practice, although that already happened in the preseason. Dude came out and took a carry, got hit on that shoulder one time, and it was done.
Yeah.
We also have Kyle Shanahan coming out, which he never does this, Freedman. So I don't even know what to think about it, because everything is subterfuge with this man. But he said, he stated that Brian Robinson Jr. was brought here to be our running back too. I don't know that I've ever heard a stronger recommendation for basically anyone. So I don't know how to feel about it, but how high? I mean, are we essentially saying this is Jordan Mason in the first part of last year immediately?
Yeah. Kyle Shanahan, who doesn't even know if the world's going to exist in a week, saying that Brian Robinson is the running back too on the team. That's pretty definitive. So yeah, I would sort of
top 12.
Yeah. Man, I don't know if I could do that, but yeah, probably he's top 12. He's low end RB1, high end RB2.
Let's just look at
conversation.
Look at it real quick. Let's just because again, like this is one of the beauties of doing this show. We like to talk big picture, but like, why not go ahead and help people out? So Freedman, I'm going to put it just on get the receivers out of there, just have it on the running backs consensus sort here by you and me. We have CMC both at 2 in the ranks right now. Bijan obviously sitting there at 3. I'm just looking down. I could see you putting him over Genty. Like you're a little sour on Genty this week. You would like soak up the moment just to like push Genty one more spot down. Dude, I'm telling you right now, I think I could get him in over Chuba Hubbard for sure. I could get him in over Pollard.
Yes.
I think I can get him in over James Cook. I think that's like, so guys, we're talking running back 15, 16-ish. Yeah. I think it's a little tougher as you move up from there. Alvin Kamara fully healthy week 1.
That's a
close call. Probably a tier though. That's probably a tier.
Yeah. My heart wants to put him above Genty, but should I? No. I don't want to put him above Kyron Williams. I don't want to put him above Alvin Kamara, but yes, above Chuba Hubbard.
But yeah, so like the tier like there, I think is actually, look at this logic from James McCool, like actually hitting this pretty on the head. I think the way we would tier some of this, you would probably put Genty in the tier below. If you got to draw the tier line, you'd put him with Kyron, James Conner, Kamara. But I think that's his tier. I think he goes into the Kyron, James Conner, Kamara tier, guys. And we just talked about how much variance plays a role. Like that's a tier for a reason. That means Brian Robinson Jr. would be a choice versus those guys.
Yeah. And by the way, I should say, like the logic that we have there, the ability to sort of pick the rankers that you want to have the full functionality of both the ranking and then the projections, you can get that with the Fantasy Life Plus subscription. And you should use the promo code Freedman for 20% off.
Yes, guys, use the code Freedman. We will always want to honor our guests on the show and keep them coming back. So please use that code to get your 20% off. We will now are for sure to get comments in the YouTube channel, Freedman, of when does the commercial end? Even though I've mostly just had a 2-box of us talking the whole show, but that's what I live for, are the YouTube comments. So guys, keep them coming. We love you. All right, so let's keep going here. And this next one is on me. Jerry, now this one's interesting because we did our show that came out this morning with Ian yesterday, where we walked through all the rankings, and one of the guys, and you guys are going to see this man on the cover, Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy is on the cover of the thumbnail for our YouTube show with myself, Freedman, and Ian yesterday. Jeudy, though, I'm scared. Wide receiver 22 in the projections, wide receiver 31 in my ranks. And this was really straightforward for me. One, like, I get it. Joe Flacco's thrown for 1,000 yards per game, like if we go back over the last 3 years. So, like, he's kind of like Jameis Winston in that way. He can even take a nap, like, on the sideline during the game, and he can still absolutely crush. So, Joe Flacco's basically a god. But this is the thing for me. You've got David Njoku, okay, that you agree. You like him. You gave him a warm. Freedman now not only has wet blankets to hand out on the rankings show on Thursdays, guys, he has warm blankets. So make sure you go check out the show. Warm blanket for David Njoku, nice and cozy, makes Freedman feel, just warm and tingly inside. For me, the challenge is this. Cedric Tillman is also there, and he's healthy. Yeah. And Cedric Tillman, last year, whenever we had him on the field, Jerry Jeudy, basically, it was those two battling each other each week, and Tillman really won the battle over the 4, now as a small sample, those 4 games. And so I just feel like we're talking about an offense that we don't think is going to score a lot of points this week. We're talking about an offense that we generally don't like on a team that we don't think is going to win that many games overall. And so I worry that, like, someone has to get squeezed here, and I don't know who it's going to be. It might not be Jeudy, but my point is it could be anyone any given week. And so for me, I leaned more into Jerry Jeudy's floor in that scenario. I think there's also a wild card of Harold Fannin Jr., a guy that they drafted in round 4 that's had a great camp. They were getting him, work in the slot, giving him work in 12 personnel. Yes, like if they throw any other little wrinkle into this thing like that to go along with retard, I just feel like there's some fragility with Jerry Jeudy. Now, you can feel free to give a quick rebuttal here because I know you do like Jeudy. You've got him as your wide receiver 21, so you're 10 spots above me. Yeah,
you are fair to talk about Cedric Tillman and what he did in that 4-game sample after they traded Amari Cooper, before Cedric Tillman was injured. Right, he was there and he was battling with Jerry Jeudy and beating Jeudy. But I will say, I think this offense takes a step forward with Joe Flacco at quarterback, and I like the matchup. I will say I agree with a lot of what you said. There's fragility in this, but for at least this 1 week, I wasn't going to let the fragility factor in so much because they're going against the Bengals defense that I have almost no
and you have Flacco starting.
Yes.
We don't know how long we'll get that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, you might as well get your Jerry Jeudy starts in. That's one way to look at it. If you've got Browns, start them now because we don't know what the offense is going to look like later in the season. So there could be something to that as well. All right, so we're going to go to the next one here, and this one flips back to me. This one flips back to Freedman. Deebo Samuel. Freedman, you've got him projected as your wide receiver 34, but you're moving him down in the ranks to wide receiver 42. So you're dumping him 8 spots.
Yeah.
You're dumping Deebo down the ranks, Freedman. So explain yourself.
And I will say we have a massive divergence in how it is that we view Deebo this week. You projected him as wide receiver 15 and pretty much held steady with the ranking at wide receiver 17. So there's already a big delta in the projections for us. And then I magnified that all the more by dumping him further in.
So guys, if you're watching, I'm just sorting by the ceiling, on the projections page, Xfinity best. This is what gets me. And we talked about our process earlier, 28.1. And you talked about Freedman. Well, we didn't get to that part, but the more outs you have, the better. Yeah. Deebo has a lot of outs. The game could be out of hand, and they just give him more carries. Yeah. If they decide to run the ball 30 times, I don't think his percentage of carries changes. He's going to get the percentage of carries. If it's 10, then that means 3. If they run the ball 20 times, that means he gets 2. So I don't know. I feel like there's some protection with Deebo. Plus, early in the year, he's healthy. And he's a perfect fit for Cliff Kingsbury. I just took over because I'm so high on Deebo. I just felt like I had to explain myself because you said there is a massive divergence.
Yeah. You're correct in everything that you said. And I have this unsteady feeling that I'm probably too low on Deebo. And I'm like,
but you would never go as high as I am.
I probably wouldn't. I'm going to continue to be a little bit of the wet blanket there. But so for people to kind of get a sense of the process, we get all the practice reports. We get all that stuff by the end of Friday. And then on Saturday, I do my big sort of overhaul of really digging more into the rankings, digging into the projections, finalizing that stuff. And so Deebo is going to be someone I think about where I'm going through this process tomorrow. But right now, my thoughts on Deebo are that, it's the first week in a new offense. They're going against the Giants. They're big favorites. And in the betting model that we have here at Fantasy Life, they're even projected better than the market right now. So I'm pretty on board with the Commanders. And so that could mean at some point Deebo gets a lot of yards and a lot of points because I'm expecting good things out of this offense. But I'm also expecting the offense not to need to push the ball to Deebo. He's still got Terry McLaurin there that he has to compete with for targets. He still has, I think, a underappreciated tight end in Zach Ertz, who's going to compete for targets. And then they've got this 3-headed backfield that I think they're going to leverage maximally, especially when they get out to a lead. So I'm just a little uncertain about Deebo for week 1. And I just kind of want to signal hey, I think he's flexible, but I probably wouldn't want to be depending on him this week.
I'm going to say, guys, I love Freedman. He's way too low here. 42. But this is the thing. Terry McLaurin's not a target hog. Terry McLaurin's an efficiency player. He's 21% target share guy. Nothing changed last year. He just caught more touchdowns. Zach Ertz is basically dead, but there's no one else. So they have to keep throwing it to the corpse known as Zach Ertz. And I do think he's great for it's 3rd and 3. And it doesn't happen to be Jaden Daniels deciding to do what Jalen Hurts did last night, which is kind of cover going to step up and just go because I'm going to just basically run by Zach Ertz anyway. Deebo is such a wrinkle. And again, Cliff Kingsbury, if you guys go back and look at RPO, screens to wide receivers, rushing plays to wide receivers over the last 3 years, top.
Yeah.
So they brought him here for a reason. And imagine the gravitational pull of Jaden Daniels on an RPO. And now you've got Deebo healthy in game 1. I don't know how long it's going to last. So it's kind of your Jerry Jeudy thing. I'm getting Deebo up here now.
Let me say, I think one of us is entirely correct. Like I think it's going
There's
to
a wide range of outcomes.
like I think it's going to be either they are intentionally being like, look at this new guy that we got and we are using him to the extreme, or it's just going to be like, oh hey, we didn't really need him this week. Like I don't think he's going to finish as like your wide receiver 24. I think he finishes like really high up there, or it's like it was just not at all on the radar.
Yeah, I think I could see that. I could see that playing out. All right, so we got two more players to get to here, guys. Jakobi Meyers, wide receiver 30 in my projections, wide receiver 37 in my rankings. This was really just kind of straightforward for me. I mean, Jakobi Meyers, the whole thing of like wanting to leave, and this was before they grabbed Amari Cooper, and then Amari Cooper retired. I saw a really funny tweet yesterday. I mean, just go ahead and put Dante Thornton Jr. in the Hall of Fame. Like, I mean, Jakobi Meyers demanded a trade. Amari shows up and retires after watching this guy practice. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just really Brock Bowers. But whenever I look at Jakobi Meyers, like, there's something there, man. And like, he's not a ceiling play anyway. Jakobi Meyers is a floor play receiver, period. Doesn't mean he can't have a spike game. I definitely think he's an underappreciated NFL player. He's been doing this for years. Like he did it in England. He's now, he's done his job here in Vegas as well. But when I get to a name like that and I start to have a little uncertainty with, man, Dante Thornton immediately won the outside job. He's asking to be traded. They brought Amari Cooper in. Brock Bowers operates essentially in the same area of the field as him. Right. And he is a young, absolute freaking beast. Yeah. Then we got Michael Mayer, who they might use more 12 personnel. I mean, Pete Carroll is known for doing that stuff. They spent a second-round pick on Michael Mayer just 3 years ago. People have forgotten him. They see he had some personal issues last year, which might have been, dude, Brock Bowers is a badass. What am I doing here with my life? Because now I get stuck behind like maybe one of the only tight ends that could hold me back. There's a lot going on, in my opinion, with this offense and then Ashton Genty, who they just spent this high pick on that they're going to want to feed. And so, again, I just think for a guy that he's going to project fine is that middle of the road wide receiver 3. It's kind of like what you said, but even though he might not be a lock in starting lineups, he's in a lot of starting lineups. My thought was, I'm on a floor play that might not have the floor. My instinct was to bring him down.
Wide receiver 37 is also where I have him, just sort of naturally. And so I would say like he just feels like the quintessential wide receiver 37. Like he's the first guy that you put after your top 36. You just like almost every week, just slot him in, wide receiver 37.
All right, Freeman. Number 10, drum roll, because this is a big one. We went in the order of the difference in ranks for the top 100 players across our consensus. This is a guy that ranks very high, and you are significantly lower on than your projections. And that name is Nico Collins, the beast from Houston. Look at all the underlying data. It screams Julio freaking Jones. This man, I think, is just he's a madman. He's a great wide receiver, but you've got him at wide receiver 2 in your projections, wide receiver 9, though, in your rankings, a 7-spot delta, which I would say is the most significant thing we've talked about because this is a player that most people have in their top 10 this week.
Yeah. So I'm going to be showing a little bit of my butt on this one. I updated the projection, but I haven't updated the ranking yet. Just in terms of so that I think that explains a lot.
So Nico moves up. A
lot of the delta here. He moves up. Now that we know Christian Kirk is out, that is reflected in the projection, not yet reflected in the ranking.
Okay. So I will say this. I already had Nico there before Christian Kirk, but I do think Christian Kirk, that's good. Well, we have just a few seconds. If you want one quick bonus, Freeman, I have some guys down here. You can pick Freeman's grab bag here. Cooper Kupp, Darnell Mooney, Tank Bigsby, or Khalil Shakir. You had drastic differences on all of these guys in your projections versus your ranks. Is there one you want to talk? You want to bag on the Seahawks one more time, or are you going to go in a different direction?
Yeah. Khalil Shakir. I'm projected at wide receiver 38, moved it up to wide receiver 32. And I know that's maybe not a massive difference, but I just always kind of want to be a little bit higher on Khalil Shakir because I do think he's the best wide receiver that the Bills have. He's gotten better every year of his career. He just got paid. Like, what?
No worries about coming off the high ankle sprain that you think it happened early enough in camp?
I think it happened early enough, and like we'll look at the practice reports. And if he's practicing in full this week, then it's like, all right, he's good to go. He reminds me a little bit like stylistically, but also like kind of career trajectory of someone like Doug Baldwin, to where it's
I love
it. It's like you never think this is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, but then he just has like one season to where it's like, oh man, this guy just had like 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns.
You know, it's so funny that you say that is, it's kind of like the meme, that goes around that, and we talked about it last week. If you guys haven't heard it, a lot of you guys are probably out because, doing your Labor Day thing. I get it. But Ian and I did a show and it was like our fantasy pet peeves, like the things that we count against one player, but then for another player, like we let it go or we find some weird way to twist it in their favor, because it's like this bias that we just have that sometimes we don't even recognize. But like, I think of that meme, where the guy steps in, and he's good looking, talking to the receptionist, he's like, Rashee Rice, low ADOT, high yak player. And they're like, oh, you're so cute. And then you step in, Khalil Shakir, got a great quarterback, just like Patrick Mahomes, low ADOT player, big yak, human resources. Again, they're very similar. And I'm not saying he's Rashee Rice. He hasn't proven it yet. But, man, last year, Khalil Shakir, man, I love the call here. Yards per route run, career high. And this guy is on a trajectory every year. Targets per route run, yards per route run, fantasy points per route, fantasy points per game. Those things have all gone up every single year. And then the Bills saw it, to your point, the crescendo is they paid him.
Yeah.
Right? So you'll hear me say Rashad Bateman got paid. Don't care. He's been the same player for 20 years now, so I don't care. They decided to pay him, great. But when I see something like this, then it's like I feel like there's like kind of this, and maybe this is wrong, right? These connections we can make in our brain, but all the data lines up with paying Shakir, okay? Yeah. So anyway, wide receiver 38 in Freedman's projections, 39 in mine. Freedman wide receiver 32 in the ranks. I'm wide receiver 39. But I love the call, not just for the week, Freedman. I love the call on Khalil Shakir, I think, as someone potentially for the rest of the season. So that is going to do it for Talk Data to Me, episode 6. Freedman, I really appreciate you coming on. Tell folks where they can find your work, what you got going on this weekend, what folks need to check out.
Yeah, so I have Freedman's favorites on FantasyLife. Also have a bold calls. It's funny. I kind of resisted the idea of a bold predictions piece. It's like, oh man, I really. But then they talked about it. I thought about it. I was like, actually, yeah, this gives me the area to be able to say all of my outrageous thoughts. So a bold calls piece you can find on the site. I've been on. This is the third show. I'm going to be on another show. Later with Ian.
You are on the gauntlet of shows.
Yeah. So like four shows in like a 24-hour period. It's fine. This is what it is. It's week 1, baby. It's the time to grind. So going to be updating the rankings and the projections on Saturday. They'll be live on the site. So check it all out, man. It's week 1. I'm excited that football's back.
Me too. I'll be right in there with Freedman and the projections, and then the rankings bunker. We'll be updating those things as news breaks. Doesn't look like it's going to be super active. We'll see where we end up, Freedman. But obviously the final, we'll have the final tweaks, everything all the way up through Sunday morning. Also, you guys can go check out my rankings, risers and fallers, basically comparing to where we drafted them for week 1, because since we didn't have a week before this. So you can check that all over on fantasylife.com for completely free. And like Freedman said, use that 20% off code Freedman, FREEDMAN, so that you guys can check out the utilization report, the projections, all this cool stuff we have for you over at Fantasy Life. Until next time, appreciate you, everybody. See you later.